Okay, good day everyone. So we will going to discuss right now the last lecture that we will going to tackle for this semester. Let me first share my screen. Alright. So what we were going to discuss right now is very essential and important in you as a future researcher kapag kayo ay nagre-research na, which is all about hypothesis testing. But before that, let me first give you the definition of a hypothesis. Hypothesis is a general statement to be accepted or rejected. Meaning to say, it is a statement that you should not be accepted or rejected right away. You're just going to tell after you test it if you need to accept or reject, but not right away. Okay, you should not accept your hypothesis right away, alright? Another ano niyan is that it is a conjecture. It is also an assumption because we are claiming something, we are assuming something. That's why it is an assumption. Well, at the beginning of the study, you are already claiming something. We are already claiming something. So that's why it's an assumption, a statement of claim, so assertion, and an inferential statement. That's why in inferential statistics, the one of the basic lecture in inferential statistics is about hypothesis testing. So, alright. So, in hypothesis, we have two, the null and the alternative. So, null hypothesis is a statement to be tested that either accepted or rejected. Alright. So, this null hypothesis is the claim or already being claimed that you need to test whether you need to accept it or to reject. That's why in our researches, in our thesis, we don't have to write the alternative anymore. Most of the institutions are fine for writing just they are accepting if you write only the null hypothesis because it is a guarantee that once your null hypothesis was rejected, the counter statement will be the one to accept. And the counter statement is called the alternative hypothesis, which is it is the accepted statement once the null is rejected. So once your null is rejected, that is the time that your alternative was being accepted. It is the complete opposite or the counter statement of your null. That's why sabi ko sa inyo kanina, hindi nyo na kailangan isulat sa inyong research yung alternative. Just null is enough. Okay? And that's the definition of hypothesis. So, the process of testing it is called the hypothesis testing. It is a process of finding enough evidences to conclude whether the acceptance or rejection of a belief or hypothesis about a parameter is reasonable. Because, as what I've said, a hypothesis should not be accepted or rejected right away. It doesn't mean that once it is being claimed, it should be accepted right away. No, that's not the case. Parang judicial system lang yan, di ba? If, even the criminal is or innocent unless they are proven guilty. That's why the prosecutor will gather all the evidences to convict them. Diba? Yung trabaho ng prosecutor is to convict the criminal by finding enough evidences to prove that they are guilty. But otherwise, they are innocent unless proven. Pero nandito, sa inyong study, we need to find enough evidences to justify if your claim should be accepted or not. That's why we have this so-called hypothesis testing. And in hypothesis testing, we have the 6 steps. Number 1 is formulating the null and alternative. Of course, we cannot begin anything if we do not have statements. Number 2 is selecting the level of significance. Of course, it's very essential for us to know the level of significance because it will determine the probability of committing errors or how big the error will be depends on the percentage of significance. most of the researchers use 5%. Determining the type of test. So we have two, the one-tailed test and the two-tailed test. We will go to find out later which is which. And of course, after determining this is also the time for us to choose the best appropriate statistical test for us. It depends, of course, on the data that we need to study or we need to make. And number four, defining the area of rejection. That's why I've told you during our measure of shapes that in a normal distribution curve, the bell curve, one of the uses of it is for the hypothesis testing. Because we are going to use the normal distribution or the normal curve to determine the area of rejection. Because the area of the rejection will tells you if you will going to reject or not the null hypothesis. So kapag yung computed value natin is nasa shaded part, of course, we will going to reject. Otherwise, we will going to accept. Next is calculating the value of the statistical test. This is will be done using the Microsoft Excel or SPSS. But in our case, we are going to utilize the Microsoft Excel. Then lastly is the stating the decision and making statistical conclusion. There is a difference between decision and conclusion. When we say decision, meaning to say we are just deciding if we are going to accept or to reject our null hypothesis. When you say conclusion, this is the time for us to, you know, make an interpretation, make an actual meaning, and eventually to answer the statement of the problem. So that's the last step. You need to make a conclusion. Ano na ngayon? What happened to your study? What happened to your claims? That's the last step. So let's discuss it one by one. The step one is formulating the alternative and null. For example, I have here some sort of problems. The researchers surveyed principal of selected elementary schools in NCR. One of the reasons proposed was that leadership capability is a means of retaining faculty. In a scale of 1 to 4, the principals get a mean response of 3.96 interpreted as highly capable. But the researchers found out from a sample of 20 principals that it would rate lower than highly capable if they will conduct a hypothesis test to prove their theory what can be concluded. So always keep in mind before anything else that the symbols to be used. In real life, sa totoong buhay, the null and the alternative hypothesis is written in the sentence form. Of course, kapag kayo ay nagtitesis, naka-sentence form yon. But this is a math subject, and of course, we all know that a math subject will always be in symbolic form. So take note of the symbols. The null hypothesis was equal, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. The alternative should be not equal, less than, or greater than. But take note of this one. So kapag less than, dapat greater than or equal to. Kapag greater than, dapat less than or equal to yung null. Kapag equal and not equal, of course, yan lang yun. Alright? Okay, going back to the problem, let's go to find our alternative. But first, let's find the variable. Ano ba muna yung variable? Variable is something that we need to test in the problem. That's something that we need to test in our study. In this case, ano ba yung gusto nating makuha? Diba, ang gusto natin makuha is the leadership capability of what? The principals. So, meaning, our variable is the leadership capability. There. So, in symbol, we use the symbol, the Greek letter mu for variable. So, our variable is the leadership capability. It is something that will be tested in the problem. Diba? Ang gusto natin makuha is the leadership capability of the principal. Meaning, this is the variable of the problem. Okay? So, in determining, tinanong natin, ano ba nakalagay? Meron tayong claim that the mean of the principals is highly capable. So, meaning to say, highly capable daw. But, as a researcher, kinontradict mo yun. They said that, the researchers said that it is lower than highly capable. So, paano natin siya i-interpret? So, always remember, katulad ng pinakita ko sa inyo, tandaan nyo lang yung mga keyword. Di ba, pinakita ko sa inyo, ang alternative is always less than or greater than or not equal to. Tingnan nyo yung keyword sa problem. May binigay dyan, lower than highly capable. As I've said, the null hypothesis is something being claimed already. An alternative is counter. Alternative is something the researchers are claiming. Kasi pangontra sa null. Nakalagay lower than highly capable, meaning they are less than 3.96, which is, ano ba yung highly capable? Yun nga yung 3.96. So, less than 3.96 or less than highly capable. Ano yung null? They are highly capable. So, they are, anong kabaligtaran ng less than? Greater than or equal to 3.96. So, therefore, this is our null and this is our alternative. So, take note of the keyword being used in the problem. But take note, the null is being claimed already. The alternative is the counter. So it said that it is lower than highly capable. So, lower than, less than 3.96. Ano ba yung kabaligtaran niya? Greater than or equal to 3.96. Alright? Next one. The finance manager of an international bank claims that the mean balance for the bank's interest charge loan account client is 210 million with a standard deviation of 0.85 million. The chief accountant of the bank selects a random sample of 118 accounts and finds a mean balance of 265 million pesos. Now, the question is that, is there a significant difference in their claims? So, is there a significant difference on their claim? Meaning, it being asked to you, may pagkakaiba ba? Yung claim ni finance manager at ni chief accountant. So, is there a significant difference between the claims of the finance manager and the claims of the finance accountant? Meron bang pagkakaiba o wala? So, take note of the word. By the way, the variable that being used is the interest charge loan. Why? Because it is the something being claimed in the problem. So, interest charge loan. Ano ba yung ating mini-measure? Diba? Our variable is something that is being measured or we need to find or we need to determine or we need to measure in the problem. Ano ba yung gusto natin makuha? The bank's interest charge loan. That's why this is our variable. And then take note of the another keyword. Is there a significant difference? Meaning you are just going to compare. May pagkakaiba ba yung dalawa? Meaning, yung null hypothesis natin is there is no significant difference, meaning they are equal. The finance manager is equal to the claim of the chief accountant. Ano yung alternative? That there is a significant difference. Meaning, the claim of the finance manager is not equal to the claim of the chief accountant. So kapag when we are talking about significant difference, we are comparing two claims if they are equal or not. So kapag there is no significant difference, meaning they are equal, their claims are almost the same. When we say there is a significant difference, meaning to say they are not equal. So their claims are different with one another. So therefore, this is our null and the alternative. Right? So that's how we are formulating the hypothesis. The next one is that we need to select the level of significance. So it measures the risk of indecision making using hypothesis testing methodology. It is the probability of committing type 1 error and type 2 error. So it's very important to know the level of significance because we are bound to commit some error. We just, as much as possible, we need to lessen the percentage of it. Of committing the type 1 and type 2. Wala namang perfect na research. Pero it depends on the level of significance. Gaano ba kadami yung magiging gap, research gap. So, when you say type 1 error, meaning it is rejecting that is true. I repeat, type 1 error meaning you reject something that is true. For example, you already know that it is true, but because of some sort of circumstances, you rejected it. It is type 1 error. When you say type 2 error, meaning you accepted something that is false, meaning, it's wrong, it's false, but you accepted it. The consequences of committing the type 1 and type 2 error is that the credibility or negative impression. For example, our judicial system. We know that they are guilty, but we accepted them. Instead of convicting them, we filed not guilty. So, accepting, even if it's false. So, that's type 2 error. Uh, Usually, this happens because lack of evidences. There's no lack of evidences the moment that we conducted our study or we gathered the data. Wala tayong sapat na ebidensya. That's why we are committing type 1 and type 2 error. It is denoted by an alpha symbol. It is directly under the control of individual performing the test. Kung sino man you as a researcher or the statistician, you can determine what the level of significance you are using. Additionally, levels from 0.01 to 0.10 or 99% to 90% level of precision. For example, in academic research, we are oftenly use 0.05 or 5% level of significance, meaning at least 95% correct. But in academic research, no, in medical research, they are only using 0.01 or 99% level of precision, only 1% level of significance. Because medical research, the medical experts are dealing with life. They should not commit more errors because the life of individual will be at stake. That's why when you are conducting medical researches, will always go down to 0.01 or at least 99% precise. But in the in the education world, 0.05 is accepted. 5% level of significance or at least 95% precise. So that's step 2. So when you already know the level of significance, the next step that you need to do is to determine the type of test to be used. In determining the type of test, we have the so-called one-tailed test. One-tailed is that if the established alternative hypothesis is directional, meaning to say may direction. For example, the achievement of the math major is greater than the achievement of the English major. It is a direct statement, meaning you are directing to the point that the achievement of the math major is greater than the achievement of the English major. So when you are having a direct statement, it is a one-tailed test. And always remember, kapag a one-tailed test, it's either less than or greater than yung alternative. For example, here is your data. Less than 50 or greater than 50. Kapag alternative, dapat greater than or less than yung alternative, ha? The next step is that a two-tailed test. It is a two-tailed test if the established alternative hypothesis is non-directional. What do you mean by non-directional? Meaning it is a not direct statement. Example, it said that the achievement of the math major is not equal to the achievement of the English major. It is not a directed statement because you don't say which is greater than the other. You just said that math major is not equal to the English major. It is not directed statement. So when it is a non-directional statement, it is a two-tailed test. And a two-tailed test has a symbol of not equal sign in the alternative. So for the two-tailed test, always take consider your alternative should be not equal po. And the next step is ito pa pala. Before proceeding to the next step, so ito yung ating itsura ng ating curve. For the left-tailed, of course, the alternative must be less than. For the right-tailed, the alternative must be greater than. And for the two-tailed, we are using both sides of the normal curve, the left and the right. And your alternative must be unequal. Alright, so determining the type of test to be used, we have 3. But the basis for deciding whether to reject or to accept the hypothesis being tested, meron tayong 3. Wait lang. Just to be clear, these 3 are used if we are going to find out the significant difference. But if we are going to find out the correlation or the significant relationship or the effect, the significant effect, the impact, we don't use these 3. Merong ibang statistical test ang gagamitin kapag ang gusto nyong makuha ay significant relationship, significant effect, impact, ibang test yung ginagamit. But these 3 are being used if our goal is to find maybe significant difference or we need to compare. So in a comparative study, these 3 are used. But in a correlational study, there's another statistical test to be used, okay? Just to be clear, ha? So the t-test and the c-test are actually the same. Meaning to say, the result of t-test are the same with the result of z-test. And t-test, the process of it are almost the same as the process of z-test. But researchers prove that the result of t-test is actually more accurate than the c-test. That's why if you are going to make use of z-test, it's better for you to use the t-test. Magkapareho lang naman po yung kanilang resulta. But the researchers prove that t-test results is actually more accurate than z-test. When you say F-ratio test, it is the analysis of variance. It is the ANOVA. This is being used kapag your data are too many already. So F-ratio tests are also known as the analysis of variance. But for the sake of the discussion today, we will going to utilize later the t-test. Okay? So step number 4 is defining the area of rejection. It's very important for us to know our rejection area. For example, I have here a data. So I have a data and we have a degree of freedom of 6. By the way, the degree of freedom can be found on the Microsoft Excel, but also on the t-test table. There you go. For example, 0.05 and then one-tailed. 0.05 one-tailed. Degree of freedom of 6 is ito yon. 1.940 pagka t-test ha. Kapag ANOVA, meron din ibang table. Pinapakita ko lang sa inyo sa manually. So, kunyari, degree of freedom is 6, 0.05, one-third, at ito yung ating critical value, 1.943. But, makikita nyo naman po siya kapag ni-utilize natin yung Microsoft Excel. So, let's just say 0.5%, so 1.943. Let's just say that, for example, our data is right-tailed, so we are utilizing the positive part. Ang rejection rule dyan is that you will going to reject the null if the computed value is greater than 1.943. Otherwise, you're going to accept your null. Meaning, to say, for example, you already obtained the t-value. I'm referring to t-value because I'm referring to t-test. Kapag ka f-test, ibang usapan yun, syempre. So, let's say you already have your data or your computed t-value. Nakapag-compute ka na. Kapag yung na-compute mo is greater than 1.943, which is kunyari, ito yung critical value natin, nandito siya sa area of rejection. Kapag nasa area of rejection siya, or nasa shaded region siya, that's the time for you to reject the null. Otherwise, of course, kapag nasa area of acceptance or wala sa shaded part, we will going to accept the null. That's how we are making the decision rule or the rejection rule. Rejection rule is very important in such a way that it will determine if we are going to accept or not our null hypothesis. Okay? Another example. For example, let's say left-tailed naman. For example, we have a data already. For example lang, we have a degree of freedom of 10, we have 1%. And it is left-tailed, for example. So, kapag kukunin yung t-value, for example, sa degree of freedom of 10 and 1%, that's actually negative 2.764. Tignan natin sa table. Degree of freedom of 10 and 0.10, one-tailed, this, 10, 0.01, sorry. So, 0.01, then 2.764. So, but for example, we are utilizing the left-tailed. So, we are using the negative part, negative 2.764. This is the critical value. So, let's say this is your critical value. Paano tayo gagawa ng rejection rule? You will reject the null if the computed value is lower than negative 2.764. Otherwise, accept the null. Because, diba, we all know that the negative number, the higher the number, the lower its value. For example, negative 3, negative 5, negative 4, mas lower siya. Diba? So, kailangan nandun siya sa rejection region. Paano mapupunta sa rejection region? Dapat mas mababa siya sa negative 2.764 para pasok siya dito sa shaded part. So, we can reject the null. Otherwise, kapag nasa area of acceptance, we will going to accept our null hypothesis. Okay? Alright. Pagka two-tailed naman, ganun din. Magkabilaan lang nga. For example, meron akong degree of freedom of 12 and 10%, two-tailed. Ang t-value niyan, for example, is 1.782, but we are utilizing two-tailed, for example, kasama yung negative 1.782. Critical value. So, kanya ito yung critical value mo. Ang rejection rule natin is that, i-reject mo yung null kapag, syempre, pasok sa mga shaded part, which is, kailangan greater than the positive 1 and of course, less than the negative 1. So that, ito yung decision rule natin. Reject the null if the computed value is greater than 1.782 and lower than negative 1.782. Otherwise, we will now going to accept the null. Okay? So it's very important to know the area of rejection because the area of rejection will help us determine if the hypothesis should be rejected or not. It has a big impact on the conclusion, of course. Okay? The step number 4. The step number 5 is calculating the statistical test. Dito papasok po yung Microsoft Excel. So in just a matter of seconds, may lalabas ng resulta. Step number 6, stating the decision and making statistical conclusion. So decision is based on the computed value and the statistical test and your decision rule. Kaya nga tayo may decision rule kanina. Kaya may rejection rule tayo. Kasi yun ang gagamitin nyo. Depende yon sa computed value mo. Meaning to say, yung decision will be all about determine if your null hypothesis should be rejected or not. Sasabihin mo na po dito kung i-reject mo yung null at or hindi. And then the next one is the conclusion. Conclusion is based on the result of the statistical test together with the related literature and studies and the researcher's observation. Ito yung tinatawag natin triangulation. Sa madaling salita, when we are conducting a conclusion, we are giving an actual meaning on what the data we have so far. Based on the data that we gathered, based on the RRL that you have, based on the results that you are already on your hands. So you are formulating the conclusion. So you're now making an actual meaning, an actual interpretation. What happened to your study now? So in conclusion, you will now answering the statement of the problem. Sasagutin niyo na ngayon yung mga tanong sa isipan niyo before the study made. 'Di ba? May mga SOP kayo eh. So, kapag nagkaroon na kayo ng conclusion, nasasagot niyo na yung conclusion niyo. At dito na yung papasok yung recommendation. Alright? And that is the 6 steps for the hypothesis testing. So, dumako tayo kay t-test. So, we are using the t-test. I repeat, the z-tests are the same with the t-test. It's just that the result of the t-test are more accurate than z-test. The f-test or the ANOVA are used kapag your data is too many. To give you a hint, to give you some learning first, tandaan nyo lang po na I repeat again, kapag yung ating study ay comparative test, we are using either t-test or ANOVA. Pero kapag yan ay correlational, meaning gusto nyo mahanap yung relationship, gusto nyo mahanap yung effect, gusto nyo mahanap yung impact, hindi nyo pwedeng gamitin yung t-test ha. T-tests are only used if you want to determine the progress, achievement, under comparative research. You can use the t-test. So, you can use the t-test with the sample size is small or less, n is less than 30. Of course, the sample must randomly selected and the sample must normally distributed. For inferences based on a single sample, the population standard deviation is unknown. For inference based on 2 samples, the population have equal variances. So, meron tayong dalawang uri. Actually, meron pang isa, the paired test. Doon muna tayo sa one sample mean formula. This is the formula, but I'm just going to show it to you because we are going to utilize the Microsoft Excel. The one sample mean formula is that it will use if you have a population versus sample data. Meaning to say, as a researcher, kapag yung data nyo ay from the population and sample, you are comparing your population and your sample, you are going to make use of the one sample mean. For example, the population of the students in Cavite State University, you are going to compare it to a certain batch, or a certain course, or to a certain section. So, population versus sample yon. One sample mean yung gagamitin natin. When we are having two independent mean formula, two different data, meaning galing sa magkaibang grupo. For example, the progress of the students from two different schools. Let's say the academic achievement or the academic progress of the schools from public school versus the students from a private school. So from two different data, yung i-compare nyo from two different data, you will now going to utilize the two independent mean formula. Okay? Meron pang isa, the paired t-test. Yung paired t-test naman po, ginagamit yon kapag it came from one respondents but two different time or two different data. Usually, kapag before and after. Kunyari, pre-test tsaka post-test. Or pre-therapy and post-therapy. Pero galing lang din yun sa iisang grupo. Ang yun ay paired t-test. Okay? Alright, so tapos na yung slideshow. We will now go into on the Microsoft Excel. But let me first check if I'm still recording. I'm still recording. Alright. So, andito tayo ngayon sa Microsoft Excel. So, in Microsoft Excel, we will going to utilize the data analysis. Pero, not all the Excel has a data analysis agad-agad. So, in case na pagpunta nyo kay data, wala kayong data analysis, kasi kailangan pag-click nyo yung data dito sa ribbon, kailangan may lalabas pong data analysis. So, kapag wala tayong data analysis, ganito yung gagawin natin. In case na walang data analysis yung ating table, Yan rin gagawin nyo. I-click nyo yung file. So, pagka-click nyo kay file, punta kayo kay option. O, click nyo si option. And then, may lalabas na dialog box. And then, click add-ins. And then, sa baba, may makikita kayong manage, Excel add-ins, click go. May mahanap ko yung maliit na dialog box. Hindi pa yan naka-check kasi wala yan, data analysis. You will go to check it. Analysis Toolpack and Analysis Toolpack VBA. And then click OK. Makikita nyo ngayon, pagbalik nyo sa main page, pagpunta nyo kay data, meron ng data analysis. Pagka data analysis, meron tayong mahahanap na, ayan, pag pinunod sa data analysis, meron niyang iba't ibang statistical test. And din sa baba, meron tayong t-test. So, ayan yung ginagamit ng statisticians kapag nag-i-interpret sila ng data. I will going to teach you how to utilize it para naman kapag kayo ay nag-research, kaya nyo na siyang i-solve on your own. Okay? Alright, so I have here an example problem. English proficiency test results of the selected students of V. Luna Elementary School. So I have here a pre-test result and a post-test result. So now, kapag ganito, kung mapapansin nyo, galing yan sa iisang respondents. Pero magkaiba. Pre-test and post-test, let's say that there's a certain selected students and you got their pre-test, and after the discussion, the same questionnaire was provided to get their post-test. So kapag ganun po, galing po sa iisang respondents, pero magkaiba yung data, ang i-utilize po natin is paired t-test. Okay? So now, lumako muna tayo sa statement of the problem. What significant difference exists between the English proficiency performances of the students using 5% level of significance? But first, let's determine the variable. So, ang variable natin is something that we need to measure. Ano gusto natin i-measure? The English proficiency pre-test and the post-test. So, that's your variable. Let's say English proficiency pre-test result and English proficiency post-test result. Post-test result. Let's say that's your variable. So now, when you already have your variable, let's determine our hypothesis. What is your question? You are being asked what significant difference exists, meaning, tinatanong kayo kung sa tingin nyo ba ay may pagkakaiba yung pre-test at yung post-test. So with that, it's just a matter of comparing if they are equal or not. So meaning, yung ating null is just that the pre-test should be equal to the post-test. So, the pre is equal to the post-test, meaning kapag itatranslate nyo into statement, you are actually saying that there is no significant difference between the pre-test result and the post-test result. And of course, yung kabaligtaran po niyan is that it does have a significant difference. So, there is a significant difference. Meaning, yung ating pre-test result is hindi equal sa ating post-test result. There you go. So, I repeat, bakit equal tsaka not equal to? Because, it tells you to compare. Meron bang pagkakaiba? Is there a significant difference between the two? May pagkakaiba ba? There is no significant difference for the null, meaning they are almost the same, meaning they're equal. There is a significant difference, meaning may pagkakaiba, meaning they are not equal. So that's how you are using it in symbolic form. So, tandaan nyo na not equal to in our problem, kapag not equal, that's a two-tailed test. Alright? So, a two-tailed test. Let's just say two-tailed. Let's find the rejection rule. So, before we know the rejection rule, kailangan mo natin alamin yung t-value, yung critical value. So, para mahanap yung critical value, this is the time for us to make use of our data analysis. So, in the data analysis, click data, data analysis. Hanapin nyo ngayon yung t-test. Since we are utilizing the paired t-test, we are, click this one, click OK, variable range. So, variable 1 is the pretest. I going to highlight the pretest part, the label, para mas malaman natin mamaya. And then variable 2, of course, the post-test. There you go. Hypothesis size mean difference will always be 0. Check the label. And then 0.05 yung ating level of significance, so hindi nyo na kailangan baguhin. Sa output, saan siya gusto ilagay? Gusto nyo ba sa new worksheet? Magkakaroon tayo ng worksheet dito. New workbook, panibagong Excel file, o sa baba lang? Kung sa baba lang, output range lang. Tapos click this, then highlight or click the cell kung saan nyo siya gustong ilagay. Let's say, gusto ko dito ilagay. So, yan yung i-click ko. And then, i-click ko ulit ito. And then, when everything's ready, click OK. Click OK. And then, there you go. Ito yung ating resulta. So, ngayon, ano yung critical value natin? Nasaan tayo? Nasa two-tailed test. So, in determining our critical value, we have this critical value. Ito yung titingnan nyo. Not the one-tail, but the two-tail. Let's highlight this para mas makita nyo. So, we are utilizing the two-tailed test, meaning both sides of our normal curve, the negative and the positive side. But even though may nakikita kayong negative lang, positive lang, tandaan nyo na lagi yan may negative at positive values. It is always have a negative and positive values. Okay? Alright, so 2.1448. So, negative 2.14479 or 1448 and positive 2.1448. There you go. Alright. So now, dyan tayo makakuha ng rejection rule. Ano yung rejection rule natin? You will going to say that you will going to reject the null if your computed value, if the computed value is, kailan? Pag pumasok sa shaded part. Kailan papasok sa shaded part? Kapag mas mataas dito, sa 2.1448. If the computed t-value is higher than 2.1448 and kailan pa? Pagka mababa doon sa negative part, lower than negative 2.1448. Otherwise, of course, we need to accept the null. Accept the null. So, i-reject niyo yung null kapag mas mataas sa 2.1448. So, ibig sabihin, pasok siya sa shaded part. And then, mas mababa sa negative 2.1448 or pasok din sa shaded part. Otherwise, nandito siya sa walang shade. I-accept niyo yung null. Alright? Okay, let's write a text box. Okay. So, ngayon yung computed value, nasan tayo titingin? Pagka titingin kayo ng computed value, dito tayo sa t-stat. I will go into highlight it para mas makita nyo. There you go. So, nanandaan nyo, negative 4.6806. Pero since sabi ko nga, may negative at positive values yan, may negative 4.6806 at the same time, meron din yung positive part. The positive 6.6806. Nasaan siya? Yung positive 4, of course, alam natin nandito yan. Sobra-sobra pa yan sa 2. Yung negative 4 sa Cartesian plane, alam natin, sobra pa yan sa negative 2. So, nasan siya? Nasa area of rejection. Tama? So, dahil nasa area of rejection, we will now going to reject our null hypothesis. So, reject the null. There you go. So, reject the null. Meron tayong desisyon. So, ngayon, dumako na tayo sa summary, sa baba. So, itong computation, just so you know, this computation, hindi yan lalabas sa chapter number 4. Kasi ito po ay lalabas sa inyong, saan ito lalabas? Lalabas po ito sa inyong appendices. Ito yung lalabas sa chapter 4, yung summary. So, i-jot down lang po natin. Ano ulit yung ating ano ulit yung ating variable? English proficiency. English proficiency pretest result. And English proficiency post-test result. What is our mean? So, mean is here. Pwede nyo naman i-check. Kunin nyo lang yung equal sign, average, then highlight all the given, close parentheses, there you go. Pareho yung sagot? Pareho. Yeah, pareho. There you go. So, yun yung ilalagay nyo. So, 22.13 and then 34.67. For the standard deviation, you can actually solve it by using the formula stdev that since it is a selected student, so let's assume it is sample. Highlight all the given, then equal sign, there you go, and then drag nyo na lang to. Gawin nyo lang siyang 2 decimal places. There you go. Or kung gusto nyo, ayaw nyo namang i-highlight, may ibang paraan. Anong paraan? Pwede nyo gamitin yung thought na yung standard deviation ay square root lang ni variance. So, ang gagawin nyo lang po, equal sign, SQRT for the square root, highlight nyo lang yung mismong variance. Equal. Pareho, di ba? 6.07. There you go. Equal sign, square root of the variance. There you go. 6.72. So, pareho. Anything is possible, basta tama. Pwedeng gawin by highlighting it, all the given. Or pwede naman using the thought that the standard deviation is just the square root of the variance. Okay? Right? Ano pwede? So, listen na natin. Ano yung standard deviation? 6.07. And then, 6.72. For the t-value, so the t-value is, since we are utilizing the two-tailed test, we are using the positive and the negative side. So, ano yung t-value? Critical. T-value is a t-stat. So, 4.6806. Critical value is the critical. Ito, 2.1448. And then our decision is that we reject the null. This is the summary. So, yung summary, ito po yung lalabas dun sa ating, dito yung lalabas sa ating chapter number 4. Hindi ito, kasi itong computation sa appendices lang to. Okay? So now, kung meron na tayong summary, we can interpret our data. Sa pagkaka-interpret po ng data, tandaan lang natin, meron tayong tatlo. The descriptive part, meaning to say, we are going to describe our data. So in describing our data, dun lang, i-describe lang po natin using our mean and our standard deviation. Okay? So, let's say, from the table, pagka nag-i-interpret tayo, naka-past tense So, let's say, from the table, it can be observed that the students perform better in their saan ba siya nag-perform? Saan ba mas mataas yung mean? 34.67. So in their post-test, with a mean of 34.67 as compared, pwede mo siya i-compare saan? Sa post-test to their pre-test mean, to their pre-test with a mean of 22.13. Period. The next one, i-describe yung data by the standard deviation. Tandaan nyo lang yung pag-describe. The lower the standard deviation, the more consistent your data. Okay? So, ano yung mas mababa? Ito. Okay, pwede nyo sabihin yun. On the other hand, it is also showed that the pretest result was more consistent since its standard deviation is lower, or was low, the standard deviation of 6.07 was lower than the standard deviation of post-test, which is 6.72. There you go. So this is how you are going to interpret using your descriptive part. So you are going to describe your data, the mean, and the standard deviation. Next one is the inferential. So sa inferential part, you will going to describe or you will going to interpret this part. So anong ginawa natin? So, pwede mo nang ilagay moreover or in addition, kung anong gusto nyo connective, the null hypothesis was rejected since the computed t-value, ano nangyari? Ba't mo siya nireject? Kasi yung computed t-value na 4.6806 was higher than the critical t-value of 2.1448 and negative 4.6806 is lower than negative 2.1448. There you go. This is the inferential. Alright? And then the last one is the conclusion. When you already has a decision, you have now the conclusion. So, pwede nyo ilagay dito that rejecting the null hypothesis means that anong dahilan? Bakit siya nireject? So, you reject the null hypothesis because nireject nyo siya dahil nireject nyo si null, hindi nyo tatanggapin si null. Sino tatanggapin nyo ngayon? Yung alternative, which is there is a significant difference. So, yun yung ilalagay nyo. Rejecting the null hypothesis means that there is a significant difference between the English proficiency pre-test and post-test result using 5% level of significance. So now, you are now going to, there you go, you are now going to answer your SOP. Anong nangyari? So rejecting the null hypothesis, meaning you are saying that there is a significant difference between the English proficiency test of the students using this level of significance. You are now going to answer the you're going to answer? You're going to answer now the statement of the problem. So itong buong ito yung ating interpretation. And ito yung ating table ng data. or result. So, kailangan po nakalagay talaga yung mga values kasi kapag wala kayong nilagay at decision lang, tatanungin ni panel sa inyo, bakit? Saan nyo nakuha? Masisilip pa yan. Always remember na dapat naka-indicate, ha? Alright? So, there's part 2. For the 2 independent mean, I'll be back with the part 2 of the recording. Stay tuned for the part 2